This is Rebecca Matalon. I'm a curator at the Contemporary Arts Museum, Houston, and I am pleased to be in conversation with the Los Angeles-based artist Nevine Mahmoud. Good morning, Nevine.
Good morning, Rebecca. Nice to see you.
It's good to see you too. So maybe I'll just start by asking you, where are you right now?
I'm at home in LA, in my house in Highland Park, which is been pretty chill, like outdoor space. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood, so I've been lucky to be able to refuge here. My studio's 10-15 minutes away. So
are you still going to the studio?
I am, yeah. I mean, it's a big building that I lease and also have tenants, so it feels like definitely it's accessible and still can be used. I'm still going there, a little less than usual with the pace of slowing down, but yeah, definitely still going.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about how, as a sculptor and as someone who's been working frequently in glass blowing, but also, in your other work, stone carving, so much of that is, if not collaborative, it involves, the labor, experience, resources of many different types of people. And, in our current social distancing moment, I'm wondering how that's impacted how you're working, if you are still working, and what you're sort of thinking about, and how that shifted making for you.
Yeah, I definitely think initially when sort of things started locking down, or it was every day there were major changes socially, restrictions wise, and I realized, I think a lot of people, we were sort of in denial, or I still had appointments booked, visits planned. I was looking forward to a glass blowing session 2 weeks ago, and assumed I'm sure I'll still be able to do it. And then when things just became real and widespread, there was this realization again of how reliant I am on certain processes and resources that involve other studios, other equipment that I don't own myself, or techniques I don't know. But then it sort of got me thinking, too, about how much I enjoy that, because there's sort of a giving up of control, when you're working with other people. But then realized without that, then I really just have to focus on certain other ways of working, which I'm capable of doing too. I mean, I've always kept a variety of private work, things I can do with my own hands alone, and these things with other people, constantly sort of trying to learn, put myself in situations with new, techniques and processes. So it's definitely been a sort of return to, what can you do alone to amuse yourself, call it work or otherwise. And I'm lucky that a lot of the materials I work with have that possibility now to work with it alone. The stone stuff, I have the equipment.
And so what are you doing when you're working on your own, as opposed to, when you say, having been to your studio and knowing that when you're working in stone, you are, picking up and getting these large chunks of often marble or alabaster, and it takes a certain amount of labor to make it smaller and get it to a point in which you're able to work on it.
Yeah, I guess, again, I don't know if it's just a happy coincidence that earlier this year, just due to a lot of projects lined up, I was in a high productivity sort of mode for since, I guess, the fall, just getting work out for Fez and a show in Miami last year. And as that was happening, I've realized the last few years, I can't sustain it all year. So when I'm in high production, I just try to make as much as possible, use the resources fully, and just keep making things even where I don't know where they're going to go. Usually I have, at least double the amount of work or things going on for a show, maybe half of the objects actually go there. So come March, I've just done independent fair in New York, and I have a lot of, you know, half done like sketches, like thoughts in the studio. So now that I'm not able to go outside of it and make new work, it's making me re-examine, spend more time with things that are there already, which actually I have had a hard time doing. So, or like, you know, giving time for it, because you're always on to the next project, or and those things tend to take a couple of years to like come back into the work. And now I sort of have to work with what I have, which luckily is a good amount of, you know, part finished, like rough objects. It's a little daunting all alone, but in a way it's like, it feels like a special moment to sort of explore that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, what you're talking about, or what you're alluding to, is this idea of slowing down, which is both a kind of adjustment to working at a different pace, but part of the way you're talking about it is a slowing down that's also a kind of retrospective look, or a kind of intuitive thinking through of, or taking stock of the way you've been working, and having to sort of shift course, and how that shifting of course is a kind of maybe thinking through projects or aspects of the work that you sort of just, because being in this sort of high production moment, just pushing things out. So I do think it's interesting the way that a lot of us, whether it's an artist or a curator or a writer, or anyone really in the field, or to, you know, have the kind of privilege of just being home and thinking through what those next steps are, that it's a kind of slowing down all around, like across the board. And that's maybe also a slowing down in our thinking, and like learning to hold on to, stay with, pay attention to aspects of our practice that, you know, we've been eager to just move past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a bit like
resuming after a nice little interruption by the vocal recordings of two cats, but going back into like these different modes of slowing down, and the way they sort of reverberate, and the way they have temporal aspects, but then also, you know, practical ways of rethinking what we're doing.
Yeah, and I was definitely like, you know, ready physically for sort of a slowing down of just physical labor, because a lot of my work is just, I mean, I enjoy it. It's a part of why I work with what I work with, like the physical interaction and the sweat and time. But again, like, it's not sustainable. It's not I can't do it. I can't work that way all the time, or else I just completely wear myself out. So being able to, like, you know, instructed by the city, be encouraged to sit and read is again a very special, because things like that, like research moments, again, I used to maybe spend more time in a sort of research period of reading and image collecting and drawing, and again, when you have like project after project and shows, it's difficult not to just sort of like want to get straight into the physical production of the object. So that has been like my main medium, I think, at the moment, just like thinking and writing and reading again, which has also helped me, you know, think about, you know, there are trains of thought and bodies of work that of course I will continue when this all resumes, but, you know, to really get a chance to think about what you want to make. I think a lot of the time with curators and artists, and, you know, you're sort of meeting the needs, you have like your work, and then you make it meet the needs of certain projects as you go, but maybe not able to sort of really reinvent something again. At least it's that I think has been like a gift of this too, being able to stop and really rethink, like, do I want to make something completely different, or you know, completely reverse the plans for this thing, or so I guess rethinking from different perspectives maybe.
And so what does that research process look like for you? You mentioned collecting images and reading. Is that reading about other artists, other processes, or what does that look like?
I think I usually revisit the same artist's work, not just as like just pleasure, like, you know, like I have like my Gober and Lena Sapotnikov books that I just like go through and remind myself of like this inventory of like shapes and colors and ideas that have like, you know, been underpinning my practice for a while, but also usually involves just sort of a new avenue of like theory research, whether it's architectural or political, that sort of like starts fleshing out something that's been going on or recurring in the work a little bit, and sort of picking but like I've been re-looking at Italian design drawings, actually Ettore Sottsass drawings. A friend of mine gave me a book, and sort of I haven't sort of paid attention to furniture and design so recently, but I feel like it's something that my work has been touching upon over the past few years. And that sort of radical moment in Milan and in Europe with those few like architecture groups has always been of interest to me, but sort of getting a little deeper into what was going on there and inform the aesthetic has been something I've been looking at recently. Even just the like opportunity, like I've talked to other artists too about like, we could make a chair or design some furniture. It's like, why not? Like, I don't know, some things feel a little more, desirable to do.
Do you think that has anything to do with working towards making something that's functional at a moment where I think we're all thinking about how we're making, producing, thinking about things that have real world applications, which isn't to say that making a sculpture or something that exists in the visual arts isn't part of that, but the desire to produce furniture, first of all, thinking about furniture being something of the home and us all spending a lot more time in our homes.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. That's exactly, I mean, like domestic space and like the erotic and has been on my mind for a long time. And I don't know if I've explicitly carved out domestic environments, but I feel like my objects often come from a world that's like quite playful, intimate. There's like an interiority, familiar thing that can, you know, be found in the domestic. And yeah, I've definitely never intentionally made or defined something as furniture, but I was, from the second I've been like quarantined at home, I've just thought so much about how important this space is now for so many people, that we can all relate now to these environments, however varied they might be. And that, I mean, sculpture in that space for me would be that, you know, traverses both like the sensual and the sculptural, would be furniture or things that your body touches. So it's been like very prominently on my mind, and then also what that potential is for like, sensuality and erotics, expression, and you know, other things that inspire the forms I'm attracted to. Because we're all sharing this, you know, whether it feels claustrophobic, whether it feels pleasurable, whether it feels all these different things. It's interesting.
It's interesting to hear you talk about thinking about furniture or the space of the domestic as a site where a body touches something. And I think part of what interests me about that is thinking about the sensuous and tactile aspects of your work, and that's both materially, their kind of lushness as you know, a soft stone that you want to caress, or glass, the smoothness of glass, but also in terms of their imagery, which is often fragments of the body in very particular parts of the body, a tongue or breasts or a limb. So it's interesting for you to start to think about, or to hear you start to think about, well, what holds those bodies? You know, if I can't make these body fragments at this moment, like what touches the body, especially in this moment in which we're going to be to some extent deprived of so much of that touch and tactility that we engage or find gratification with in an experience of another person. So I think there's something interesting to hear you think about the way that you're still interested in those forms, but it's kind of like a 180, or not even a 180, but just like thinking about
like maybe an invert. It's true. I feel like I make, like, for shows or presentations of work, I always feel like I'm, you know, working with a motif and then seeing what like that white room like needs, and usually what it needs, what I'm wanting to bring to the viewer is like this like highly like charged body fragment element. So you're like bringing the figure, the you want to touch it into this white box, and it's like with thinking about the home, it feels like it's calling for another kind of work, but and I haven't been making it yet, but even thinking about such a specific context has been really interesting in terms of just another way to sort of generate ideas from this sort of like domestic space where, like, are you craving intimacy, or are you lacking it, like, or are you know, stuck next to someone, you're actually experiencing it more, you know, intimately at the moment, like it's it feels like fruitful.
It's interesting. There's actually right now a show up here in Houston at the Museum of Fine Arts. It's a radical Italian design show, mostly from the collection of Dennis Friedman. Many of the objects or a few of the objects have already entered their collection, but it is super interesting to see. And, you know, I think we discussed this a little bit before, but unlike most exhibitions, there's a kind of way in which the furniture isn't necessarily pristine. It shows use. It shows that like bodies have been there. You know, partially I think because the production was so small on many of the objects, whether it was, you know, Anche by Pesce or Memphis or whatnot, so there is this kind of experience of it as an object that really was once in someone's home, you know, not necessarily kept in storage or on a pedestal, but a kind of a design that was meant to be used and worn. But it's interesting because there are definitely a number of works. I'm thinking specifically of Pesce's. I think it's a foot that's basically made out of polyurethane or something, foam, which is itself disintegrating just due to age and the nature of the material, which is that it's, you know, was never meant to hold up, that it's breaking apart, it's crumbling. But
because most of those objects were made of, it was just like cheap plastic, like, you know, and like bright colors and formica and all this stuff that's like not really archival, definitely not environmentally safe. But again, they were very much like products of the conditions of that environment, just like gestures that needed to be, you know, kind of like ego gestures of just like, you know, fuck this, or and again, not part of huge production lines, very few of each and whatever. So perhaps more sculptural in that way, or like have this time element. But I would love to see that show. It really is only, I was reading about it because I was brought to this MoMA catalog from the 70s. And I think that retrospective radical design, I think it's called like radical environments and the problems with, it was kind of a controversial name. It's been the only show of Italian design in the States. It's 72 in this one. I think it's only these two, which is...
Well, it's interesting. I think for so long it was, you know, like MoMA is, the show that you're talking about was at MoMA.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like, yeah, that's definitely not, you know, MoMA's is kind of, you know, the objects that they, you know, or certainly the design objects that they esteem or like have reverence for are, say, Eames, Breuer. You know, there's something that is crude or campy or excessive and brash and like questioning taste in a lot of the kinds of materials, but then also the imagery that's being used in the radical Italian design, whether that's lips or a foot or a palm tree. You know, there's this way in which it's based on existing imagery rather than a kind of geometric, ergonomic, or let's say in terms of modernism, a kind of reduced visual vocabulary, chrome or steel, clean lines, a kind of purity. And, you know, like radical Italian design is like very much corrupting of all that.
Completely, yeah. And like utopic, you know, a lot of this, I was also, I think an initial like train of thought was just thinking about like quarantine, just like self-contained modular houses. And like, you know, there's an infinite archive of that from the 60s, like bubble houses and like living in like little modules and caravans and like plastic rooms that fold out, like futuristic, utopic design. And it's like very kitsch.
That was basically like your bedroom, but a prototype as if like your bedroom could move to the street.
Right, exactly. And it's like kitsch, you know, but like you think about it now with what, you know, we're all sort of forced to, just in terms of social distancing and like, so yeah, I'd love to see more of that. Make it out to Houston and see his collection.
Yeah, I'm interested in sort of, I guess, to veer a little bit. So you had been in a high production mode going into the current health crisis, and now you're sort of on pause or reconceiving of how you can work at this moment. I'm wondering if you want to talk about any of the projects that you were working on specifically and whether those have been canceled or pushed, or, you know, if you think that what you're planning on making for those projects has shifted in relationship.
Yeah, well, the two main projects I had this year was a show in Milan, like of all years to be doing, with a curator from the Prada Foundation. And that was mainly a loaned, so most of the pieces going into that show were on loan from collectors globally. So that, like most of my other plans, nothing has been canceled. It's been pushed back. It was mainly the opportunity to go there and meet this community of fabricators and artists there. Like I had appointments with the foundries there locally and stone quarries, because again, I've sourced my stone from America and Europe, but never visited the quarries myself. So this was would have been a really great opportunity that hopefully can be revisited, to actually go to the source and pick my own stone from the land. But so yeah, we're still in conversation. The curator's Eva Fabris, and she's wonderful, and we send each other a lot of material, and we still, you know, can flesh out dialogue even more. But that was, I think I was meant to fly there next week, sadly. And the other project is a show here in LA at the Barnsdall Art Museum, which is part of the Hollyhock House. So it's like a national heritage site. I think the only one in the state. And I had a show opening there in August, which I think we've agreed is not likely, although it does fall into the later summer category. And for that, again, many of the pieces were going to be loaned, but I had planned to make a few new ones. And actually, I feel like because it's a show here in LA, and therefore there's no shipping, there's not so much shipping restriction or time frame. I was imagining that those pieces be a little more experimental and unrefined and new. And I think that's something that could still definitely happen. I don't have the resources to pay assistants at the moment. That would be a big sort of requisite in terms of really gearing up for the show or for the installation of it. But I still feel like I want to sort of execute the sort of plan. I think the pace is just a little different, but I'm not, throwing ideas away actually at this point. Again, just luckily because I have materials in the studio, and, enough of my own personal resources to sort of like continue. But yeah, the time frame, the planning is the tough part, because I do respond well and require time frames just for peace of mind and production. So with open-ended stuff, it's pretty difficult, to know when to spend or to get going or to do this. So yeah, it's sort of like a waiting game, but
yeah, it's interesting. I'm also someone that doesn't do well with kind of like an open-ended timeline. I think a lot of us work well with deadlines, but it's interesting the way, seeing how everything will shift in terms of how we work and what we're working on. I know for myself, I had some projects on the horizon that I just have felt not able to direct my focus towards, and sort of reconceiving of how I can work and what I want to work on. There's a project that I've been thinking of, or having the future about really looking at Maggie Nelson's book, The Art of Cruelty, and thinking about brutality and violence in art. And that's certainly something that I'm just not able to jump into right now at all. I think it's, figuring out how to reorient what we're working on in a lot of ways.
Definitely. I'm so curious. Yeah, I definitely am quite, have been very reliant on deadlines or whatever. So it's kind of, I know it will inevitably, for both of us, produce some different feelings, different surprises. Maybe you do less, maybe you really do start doing more or something else. Like, I'm curious. I mean, I also I'm trying to remind myself too, like, it's not years or something, it's like weeks, but we're so used to just like working and living in a certain way. It's like 3 weeks seems like so much time lost, but really it's like, well, we have the rest of our lives, hopefully. So, it's okay. But if you would have told me that a month ago, I would have completely lost it. Like,
I do think that from at least the conversations I've started to have with artists, with colleagues across the field, whether they're curators or writers or in other fields, that there's a real interest in reorienting the way we work and how we spend time and
energy.
The kinds of demands that society in which we live in has sort of put upon us the kind of pace of movement, of thinking, of always moving on to the next thing. And I think that, for better or worse, slowing down is going to be a way of reorienting vision and thinking, or so I hope.
Me too. and relating to one another and sleeping more. Although I always have enjoyed a good sleep. Good sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nevine, for talking with me today. I am absolutely grateful for you spending and giving your time, of which we all have quite a bit these days.
Talk to you about everything.
But it's been a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you so much.